So I'm going to start recording now. Because I think we're about to start going through some of the Unit 1 information, unless there's any other questions about the course itself or what you guys need to be doing. Okay. All right, well, I guess we're good. So I'm going to pull up actually the heart PowerPoint, and this is the same exact one that I have in D2L, posted in D2L. Okay. All right, so you should be able to see the heart PowerPoint. And basically what I want to do with you guys is start going through, remember I posted that announcement that it would be good if you could have the study outlines in front of you for our Zoom lecture. So if you do have that, or even if you can just pull it up on your computer and have it alongside the Zoom, I think that would be helpful so you can kind of follow along. And I would encourage you to take notes in it so you can fill in some of the blank areas on there. I think that'll be helpful. So then you have that for helping you study for the test. So in the website or the web page that I made, I do have some information from this section about the chambers of the heart, but I am going to go through this with you and give you, like, fill in some of the definitions together. And then I might skip some sections that I know I have covered by the lecture, the recorded lectures, and just content in that web page. So let me open up the study outline so I can kind of follow along too. All right. Okay, so this first slide is showing you the location of the heart, and it's showing you, you can kind of see the rough size of the heart. It's basically the size of your fist. This is what I told the lab group that came in to do the heart dissection on Tuesday. And it's what lab group B, you guys are going to do next Tuesday. You're doing a pig heart dissection. The pig hearts are larger than the human hearts. So ours, if you make a fist, your heart is roughly that size, a little bit larger than that size. It is located on the diaphragm, which is this muscle right here. It's located in between the lungs, and it's slightly to the left of the thoracic cavity. It's not right in the middle. It is located in a space called the mediastinum, which is spelled right here. It's just a small, mediastinum is a small cavity located in the middle of the thoracic cavity. The base of the heart is actually the top wide portion. So usually you think of the base of something as being the bottom, but the base of the heart is actually the top wider portion where all these blood vessels are coming out. The apex of the heart is the pointed bottom portion down here.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that again?
Yep, the apex is the pointed bottom portion. Okay. The heart is covered by a membrane that's called the pericardium. And this is the next part of the outline. The pericardium consists of 2 layers. It is made of connective tissue. And those 2 layers are listed in your outline. There's the fibrous pericardium and the serous pericardium. The fibrous pericardium is the outer layer, and it's really tough, thick connective tissue. And its function, because it's so thick, is to protect the heart and to anchor it, help to anchor it in place. Okay, the other layer, serous pericardium, is the inner layer. And that in itself actually has two really thin layers within it. The serous pericardium does. So it itself is two layers. So those two layers are called parietal and visceral. The parietal layer is the outer layer, which is actually connected to the fibrous pericardium. And the visceral layer is the inner layer. And this layer is also known as the epicardium. So this actually like touches the heart wall. It forms, really, because it's on the heart wall, it forms like what is really the outer layer of the heart, because it is on the heart. And in between those two layers, the parietal layer and the visceral layer is a just a really small space called the pericardial cavity. Okay, so just know that it's a small space between those two layers, and it's filled with fluid. It's filled with serous fluid because these are serous membranes which secrete serous fluid. So it's filled with serous fluid. Okay, so now looking at the layers of the heart, here you guys can see the pericardium that we just talked about. So this is outside of the heart. You have the fibrous pericardium, and here's part of the serous pericardium. Then here's that pericardial cavity we just talked about that's filled with serous fluid. And then here is that inner layer of the serous pericardium, also called the epicardium. And then the other two layers of the heart wall as well are right here. So the layers of the heart wall, there's really three layers that form the heart wall. The first layer is the epicardium, and that's a very thin outer layer. Then next is the myocardium, which is the very thick, you can see how thick it is here, a very thick middle layer, which is composed of cardiac muscle tissue. So because this is the muscular layer, this is the layer that's responsible for the heart's pumping action. So, you know, the heart contracts, it pumps, it squeezes blood through the heart and through blood vessels that are connected to the heart. It's this layer that's responsible for that movement, for that contraction, that pumping. Okay, and then finally, the innermost layer is the endocardium. It's a very thin inner layer that is just like one thin layer of, you guys remember epithelial tissue from A&P1 when you learned all your different tissue types, epithelial, connective, muscle. So epithelial tissue, you guys remember simple squamous epithelium? It's like one layer of thin, flat cells. That's what this is. So it's like the thinnest layer of tissue you can have. It's simple squamous epithelium, which is one single layer of epithelial cells. So that just is like the inner lining of the heart. It lines all the chambers within the heart. It lines the valves, covers the valves of the heart. Okay, so that takes care of like the outer portion of the heart. But now if we look into the inside, you can see that there are several different chambers within the heart. There's valves within the heart. So that's what I'll go through quickly next, starting with the chambers of the heart. So first of all, you have the septum, which divides the heart into right and left sides. You guys have that definition already in your outline. But then the septum is divided into two parts. There's the interatrial septum, which is actually hidden on this picture because it's covered by this blood vessel. This blood vessel is like in front of it. But basically there's an interatrial septum and an interventricular septum. Interatrial septum is located between the two atria. So it's here, although you can't see it because that blood vessel is hiding it, but it would be here in between the two atria. And the name tells you exactly where it is. Inter means between, and atrial refers to the atria. The other portion of the septum is the part that you can see. It's down here. It's called the interventricular septum. So again, inter means between, and ventricular is referring to the ventricles, which are these two chambers here. So interventricular septum is in between the two ventricles, which are here. Okay, so now let's quickly go over the chambers of the heart and some of the blood vessels that are directly associated with each of the chambers. And these are things that you guys, either if you just did the heart dissection, that you did get to see when you did the dissection, or if you have yet to do it, if you're doing it next week, you'll be prepared because these are things that you will see when you do the dissection. So there's 4 chambers within the heart. There are 2 atria and there's 2 ventricles. The atria are called the receiving chambers of the heart because they receive blood. So I'm looking at your outline. I have a description for the right atrium already. It says in the upper right. So it's in the upper right part of the heart right here. And it receives DOB. So when I use that abbreviation DOB, that stands for deoxygenated blood. Deoxygenated blood. So that is blood that has a low oxygen content. It doesn't mean that it does not have any oxygen at all. It just does not have a lot of oxygen in it. So blood that is deoxygenated is entering the heart it's first going into the right atrium. And it enters through 2 really big blood vessels and then 1 smaller one. So the first 2 are the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava. I'll give you a quick description for each. The superior vena cava carries blood from all areas above the heart. And that's this blood vessel here. This is the superior vena cava. So it's carrying blood, and it's deoxygenated blood from areas above the heart. And it's bringing that blood right here into the right atrium. So knowing that, you can probably guess what the inferior vena cava does. That's down here. So that carries blood from all areas below the heart. Okay, so they bring blood from above the heart, below the heart, and they carry that blood into the right atrium. And then there's also a small blood vessel that's called the coronary sinus. This collects blood that is draining out of the myocardium. There's spelling for myocardium if you need it. So that is carrying, or I'm sorry, the coronary sinus is carrying blood out of the myocardium. Remember, the myocardium is that the main layer that forms the wall of the heart. So the coronary sinus is draining blood that's coming from the heart itself, that's coming out of the heart wall. So the heart, not only like when it pumps blood, it's sending blood to every tissue throughout the body, but it's also sending blood to itself. It has to send blood to its own wall, because all those tissues, all those cells need blood too, and all the things that blood is carrying, like oxygen and nutrients, in order to remain alive and functioning. So there's blood that's being drained from the heart wall itself and being sent back into the right atrium. Okay, so those are all the blood vessels that are emptying blood into the right atrium. Then we have on the other side, the left atrium. That's in the upper left, and it receives, now I say OB. OB stands for oxygenated blood. So that side of the heart receives oxygenated blood from the lungs. And blood is going to get into the left atrium through 4 different pulmonary veins. These pulmonary veins are shown, you can see 2 here, they're really small, but there's 2 here going into the left atrium, and there's 2 here. And I know it looks like they're going in here, but they actually, you can't see, but they go all the way behind the heart, and they go all the way over here, and they enter into the left atrium. So these and these are the 2 sets of pulmonary veins. All of them are carrying oxygenated blood into the left atrium. So just note what you can write beside the pulmonary veins is that they are carrying oxygenated blood coming from the lungs. They carry oxygenated blood coming from the lungs. Okay. One thing, actually the next thing that's in your outline, you can't see it on this particular diagram of the heart, but you will be able to see it when you do the heart dissection. It's called an auricle, and there are 2 auricles that are located on top of each of the atria. They are like a small wrinkled, and when you look at the heart dissection, it's like a flattened pouch. And they rest on top of each of the atria. So one on the right side, one on the left side. And they basically allow extra blood to return to the atrium, to each atrium. So when blood fills each of the atria, and they get filled, if there's additional blood coming in, that blood can then go into the auricle, which rests, like I said, you can't see it here, but it's on top of the atrium, and that blood can go into that pouch and then fill that pouch. Okay, so that allows like extra blood to return to the heart. All right, so now let's go down to the ventricles. The ventricles are called the pumping chambers of the heart, because these are the chambers that really contract and squeeze blood out of the heart. So the right ventricle is here. It's in the lower right. And you guys have this description already in your outline. It receives deoxygenated blood from the right atrium. So blood goes from here down into the right ventricle. And from here, blood gets pumped into the pulmonary trunk, which is this blood vessel here. The pulmonary trunk, and this is what you can add in your outline if you have it in front of you. The pulmonary trunk splits into 2 pulmonary arteries. Which send blood to the lungs. Okay. So here's the pulmonary trunk. Here's the one pulmonary artery. So that's going to the left lung. The other one comes out over here. That's going to the right lung. So that's sending this deoxygenated blood to the lungs because that is where this blood can go to pick up oxygen. Okay. Other ventricle is over here on the left side. It's in the lower left part of the heart, and it receives oxygenated blood from the left atrium. So blood goes into here first, the atrium, and it comes down into the left ventricle. And from there, it gets pumped out. This is the largest chamber of the heart, the left ventricle. You will be able to see that when you do the dissection. It has the thickest wall. So look how thick the myocardium is on this left side. Look at this side compared to this side. And you will, and the group A can attest to this, you will definitely be able to see this when you're using your scalpel and you're cutting into the left side versus the right side. It's much harder to get through the left side because it's so thick. So anyway, the left ventricle pumps blood into the aorta, which it comes up through here. It passes behind the pulmonary trunk and it comes out right here. So this is the aorta. And for your description of this, it is the largest artery in the body. The aorta is the largest artery in the body. Basically the aorta and all the branches, you can see already there's a couple branches coming off of the aorta. The aorta and all of its branches are carrying oxygenated blood to like every body tissue.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that one more time? About the aorta?
Yeah, I said, first of all, it's the largest artery in the body. And that the aorta and all of the branches off of the aorta, all of the arteries that come off of it are sending oxygenated blood to every tissue in the body.
Thank you.
Yeah. So the aorta, you can see, comes up out of the heart. It curves around. There's 3 branches here that are going up. They go up the neck. These branches go, one goes up the neck, one goes off to the side to the arm. So the arteries that are going up the neck are carrying blood to your neck and your head, your brain. Then there are branches that come off of here that go out toward the arm. And then this curves down. And you can see, if you look down at the bottom of the heart, it curves around, goes behind the heart and comes all the way down. It travels all the way down your thoracic cavity, through your abdominal cavity, to the bottom of your torso. And along the way, you have all these arteries that are branching off of it that are carrying oxygenated blood from the aorta to all of your individual organs and tissues. So it's obviously a super important blood vessel. Okay, so that's it for the major chambers and the major blood vessels. There's 2 other terms here in your outline that we will talk about in lab as well, or we did talk about in lab. Trabeculae carni, that is the name for the ridges that are in the walls of the ventricles. So this is these are the ridges seen in the walls of the ventricles. I don't know. Oh, you can see that, I think. Hold on. Yeah, if you look into the walls of the ventricles, do you see how there's like ridges? Like it's not, look at the atria. Like the wall is totally smooth. But if you look into the ventricles, it's not. You have these ridges. So that's what the trabeculae carni are. And what these ridges actually are bundles of muscle. It's like big, thick bundles of muscle. The other term here are papillary muscles. And these are also bundles of muscle that are associated with the cuspid valves of the heart. We're going to talk about those in just a second. So papillary muscles are bundles of muscle that are associated with the cuspid valves. So the cuspid valves are, we're going to talk about them in just a second, but I'll show you. It's this and this, these white flaps are the cuspid valves. And if you look at the bottom side, they are connected to these bundles of muscle down here and then like down in here. So the muscles that these valves are attached to are called papillary muscles. Here and here and here. Okay, so moving on in the outline are the valves of the heart. So my plan for right now is I want to go through the valves with you guys. And then I'm going to give you, because I've been talking for like about an hour now, I'll give you guys like a quick break, 5 or 10 minute break, just to go to the bathroom, whatever, take a break from writing. And then we'll come back and I'll do a little bit more. Okay. All right, so valves of the heart, we're at that section in your outline. So this is like the bottom of page 3. Basically, the valves within the heart, and there's 2 main sets of valves. They ensure that blood is flowing in the correct direction and that blood is not going backwards. So, and what mainly controls the opening and closing of these valves is pressure. When there's enough pressure on one side of a valve, the valve is going to open up and allow blood to get through. So I'm going to do the atrioventricular valves first, which are also known as the cuspid valves. And actually, you will see the term cuspid valve more than you see the term atrioventricular valve. And I usually use the cuspid valve term more than AV valve. So here's another view of, oops, I didn't mean to do that. Another view of the heart where you can see just a representation of the valves. So I showed you guys on the other picture, the cuspid valves. Here's where they are on this diagram. Their function is to prevent the backflow of blood. They prevent the backflow of blood into the atria when the ventricles contract. So blood is always going from, we'll just look at the right side. It's always going from the atrium through the cuspid valve down into the ventricle. And then when the ventricle contracts, that's going to force blood out of the heart through the pulmonary trunk. So blood is always going from right atrium down into the right ventricle and out through the pulmonary trunk. And then again, it's a continuous flow of blood. So then more blood is going to go from right atrium to right ventricle to pulmonary trunk. You never want the blood that's in the right ventricle, when that ventricle contracts, to go back up into the right atrium. That's the job of the cuspid valve. It closes to prevent blood from going backward. You want to keep blood flowing in the proper direction, because if it went backward, then the blood from the right ventricle would not get into the pulmonary trunk, which is carrying it to the lungs. So then that deoxygenated blood would never get to the lungs to pick up oxygen, and then it would never get back to the heart. Like, it would ruin the whole cycle. So it's really important to make sure that blood continues to flow in the right direction. And that's the really important job that these valves have. Okay, so there's two cuspid valves. There is the tricuspid valve, which is between the right atrium and the right ventricle. So that's this one right here. It's between the right atrium and the right ventricle. And just so you know, the reason why it's called the tricuspid valve is because it consists of three. Tri means three. It consists of three flaps of tissue, like three little valve flaps. On the other side is the bicuspid valve. So just to make things even more confusing, it also has another name. It's also called the mitral valve. But typically for me, like, I use the cuspid name, so I say tricuspid and bicuspid. But just in case you see mitral valve, that is also the bicuspid valve. It's the same thing. So bicuspid valve is located between the left atrium and the left ventricle. So it's on the left side, between the left atrium and the left ventricle. And it's called the bicuspid valve because bi means two. So it consists of just two flaps of tissue. Okay. So one other thing that you'll probably notice if you look at these valves, there are like these strings at the bottom of the valve. So here's the valve flap, that white, like solid white flap of tissue. But then you have these like strings connected to the end of the valve. And that's called chordae tendineae. These are tendon-like cords. So very thick, like when I say tendon-like, like a tendon in the body, which is just a very thick piece of tissue. So they're very thick cords that connect the cuspid valves to these papillary muscles. Remember, we said the papillary muscles are just like bundles of muscle down here in the ventricles. So these chordae tendineae connect the cuspid valves to the papillary muscles. Okay, and their function is to keep enough tension on the valves. They keep enough tension on these valves so that they don't open the wrong way. They don't turn inside out. They don't open the wrong way when the ventricles contract. Okay, so let me just show you this diagram really quickly of the bicuspid valve, and the tricuspid looks very similar. This always reminds me of like a jellyfish when I look at it by itself, but this is the bicuspid valve. So this is what it looks like when it's closed. These are the two valve flaps. Here are the chordae tendineae. This is what the valve looks like when it's open. The flaps open down. So blood goes from up here to down below. And then it closes. So when I say that these chordae tendineae keep enough tension on the valve so it doesn't open the wrong way, the valve is never going to open up. Like these flaps right here are never going to open upwards, which would allow blood to move upward. These strings, these chordae tendineae, are going to keep enough tension so that the valve literally can't go up. It can't move up because they're pulling on it. So it can't go this way. So by doing that, by maintaining that tension on the valve, they ensure that blood can't flow backwards, that blood continues to flow in the right direction. Okay, and you guys will see these valves and these chordae tendineae when you do the dissection. The other group got to see them already on Tuesday, so we talked about them a little bit. So let me do just the semilunar valves really quickly, and I'll give you guys a break because then the section after that is already filled in for you on the outline, that coronary circulation section. So we don't even need to fill that in. All right, so semilunar valves, let me go. Yeah, I'll go back here for a sec. Semilunar valves are, instead of like thin flaps of tissue, they're more like a half moon shape. So it's like a curved shape. Semilunar actually means half moon. And that's just a description of what the valve looks like. So their function is to prevent the backflow of blood, into the ventricles. After they contract. Okay, so let me just describe where each one's located, and then I'll just explain their function really quickly, and we'll take a quick break. The pulmonary semilunar valve is right here. It is located at the entrance to the pulmonary trunk, which is this blue blood vessel right here. So it's located at the entrance to the pulmonary trunk. Okay. The aortic semilunar valve, you can barely see it sticking out, but here's the aorta. Aortic semilunar valve is down here. So it's located at the entrance to the aorta. Okay, so when the ventricles contract and they pump blood out of them, so that blood, I'll just show you on the right side, that blood is coming from the right ventricle. It's going up through that valve. That valve opens up to allow blood to go through. And just like the cuspid valves, that valve opens one way. It's going to open in this direction to let blood come up and through the pulmonary trunk, and then it closes. So blood is going to go up through that valve into the pulmonary trunk. Then these valves close. And so just like the cuspid valve, it's never going to open this way to allow blood to just sink back down into the ventricle. So it closes and that's it. It's never going to open back up again the other way. Same thing for the one at the entrance to the aorta. It opens one direction to let blood come out of the ventricle, and then it closes again. So it's going to prevent blood from going back the wrong way. All right, so I am going to give you guys a quick break. Do you want to take until like let's say 10:55. That gives you about 8 minutes to do whatever you need to do. And then I'm gonna think about when we come back, because we're only gonna have like 20 minutes. I'm gonna maybe do one more section of the heart outline, and then maybe I'll do a brief section of your blood vessels outline if you have that one, or if you want to grab it. All right, so go ahead and take a break, and I'll see you back at 10:55. My watch right now says 10:47. So 10:55, we'll come back. All right, see you in a couple minutes.
I have to go, so I won't be coming back. Do you know when this will be, like the recording will be up?
I'll do it like right away. It just takes a few minutes for it to download, and then I save it into a YouTube video, and then I post it. So give me like maybe 20 minutes, but it'll be very soon.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, sure, no problem. Okay, it is 10:55 and I don't want to keep you guys for too long, even though it's going to be kind of long today. So let me kind of pick up where we left off. I was looking through the outlines and I think I do want to finish this one section in the heart outline. So we just did the valves. The coronary circulation section at the bottom of page 4 is already filled in for you, so we can kind of skip that. But let me go to the cardiac conduction system. So that when I'm looking at the outline, that's like on page 5. So it should be the same for you. And I will do that, and I'll do like pages 5 and 6. And then I might skip, depending on the time, and do like a page or 2 in the blood vessels outline. So what you're seeing on the PowerPoint is a piece of cardiac muscle tissue. And you're seeing here like cardiac muscle fibers. Here's a muscle fiber. Here's a muscle fiber connected to it. Here's another one here. So these are actually really similar to skeletal muscle fibers, but they are specialized for the heart, for pumping blood. And there's a couple like special structures that are in cardiac muscle fibers that help with that function. The intercalated discs, you guys have a definition for this already in your outline. It's a thickened region of the membrane that surrounds the muscle fibers, right where the muscle fibers connect to each other. So here's one muscle fiber, and then here is the intercalated disc where it connects to the next one. So it's just a thickened region of tissue right there where the connection is. And right in that spot at the intercalated discs, there are 2 types of cell junctions so muscle fibers are cells. So this is where muscle fibers or cells meet and are held together. So the 2 types of cell junctions here are desmosomes and gap junctions. The desmosomes hold the muscle fibers together tightly. They're a very tight connection to keep the muscle fibers tightly held together.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that one more time?
It's a connection that holds the muscle fibers tightly together.
Okay.
And that's important because there's constant movement here. Like think about your heart, it's constantly beating. So it's constantly contracting, relaxing, contracting, relaxing. And so muscle fibers are always kind of moving, and you don't want them to be pulled apart during that process. So these desmosomes keep them very tightly held together. Also, in this same spot where the muscle fibers connect are gap junctions. These allow action potentials. You guys remember the term action potential. It also is a nerve impulse. That's the same thing. So it allows action potentials to travel from one muscle fiber into the next. So there's communication from one muscle fiber into the next one. You have the action potential in the first fiber, and then it travels through the gap junction to the next fiber. And then it just keeps traveling like on to the next one and the next one, and the next one. So there's like a clean line of communication. Okay, so now if we just, that's like on a cellular level, like some of the things you have in the cardiac muscle fibers that just help with their function. But now if we take a look at the intrinsic conduction system of the heart, so just go down a little bit in your outline below the pictures. The intrinsic conduction system includes special cells that can initiate an action potential and then help to send action potentials throughout the heart so that it can then contract and beat as like a coordinated unit. And it's not like you don't have this irregular heartbeat of random contractions and relaxations. So the name for these cells are autorhythmic fibers. These are cells that can spontaneously produce action potentials, and then they can conduct those action potentials through the heart. So it's really interesting. I don't know if you've heard this or not, but if you remove the heart from the body, because you have these autorhythmic fibers in the heart, it can continue beating. So these cells spontaneously generate an action potential. It doesn't have to come from outside of the heart. However, if you do remove the heart from the body, it can generate an action potential, but it might not be at a natural rhythm. So ultimately, it's going to start like sending irregular action potentials. It's going to start beating very irregularly, and then it's going to stop, so that it can't like beat forever outside of the body. It does need that control from the brain to set like a normal pace, but it can beat outside of the body. It can generate its own action potential. So that's kind of cool. So I'm just going to go through the parts of the intrinsic conduction system and just give you a description, like fill in the parts that are blank for you. First part is called the SA node, and I'll show you where it is on the diagrams. I'll show you each part. So the SA node is up here. For the description, it's called the pacemaker of the heart. This is called the pacemaker of the heart because it determines the pace. It determines the pace at which action potentials are produced. And then for the location, you can see that on the diagram. It's in the upper portion of the right atrium. So this is the part that's actually like generating the action potentials, and it generates them roughly 75 times per minute. So that's like your heartbeat. Your average heart rate, or how many beats per minute, is about, for the average person, about 75 per minute. So that is because the SA node is generating that many action potentials per minute. And once they are generated by the SA node, they then spread to both atria. So they go down through this atrium and then over to the left atrium, and then move down to the AV node, which is the next part of the conduction system. The AV node, you can see here on the diagram, is located in the, you see one of two things. It's like in the lower right atrium. Some books say it's actually in the interatrial septum. Remember, that's like the divider between the two sides. So you can you can put both. It's all the way down in the bottom of the right atrium at the, and then also like at the very top of the interatrial septum. It's all the way down like right here. And this is then going to conduct action potentials to the atrioventricular bundle, which travels down here. Once the action potentials reach the AV node, they have passed to the AV node, that's when the atria contract. And you have that noted in your outline. So once you get to this point in the conduction system, that's going to trigger the atria to contract, both of them at the same time. So now the action potential has spread through both atria, and now we're down here in the atrioventricular bundle. It used to be called the bundle of His, if you've ever heard of that term. This is located in the septum, you can see. So it is located in the mostly the interatrial septum, part of the upper part of the interventricular septum. So basically just the top half of the septum right here. This right here, this bundle of fibers right here is the only connection between the atria and the ventricles, like the only electrical connection between the atria and the ventricles. So the action potential is going to spread through this, and then it splits into two branches. That's the next thing on the outline. So there's a right and a left bundle branch, and those two branches, you guys can see on the diagram, those two branches just continue to travel down the septum all the way down. And then finally, you have the last part, the subendocardial conducting network. It's a long name, but these are just the branches that spread up through the ventricular walls. So once you reach the bottom of the septum, you guys see how these branches go up into the left side, up into the right side of the ventricular wall. So they spread up through the ventricular walls, and then that triggers ventricular contraction. So once the action potential reaches those fibers, the ventricles will contract. Okay. So the last section here to talk about is electrocardiography, basically what you see on an EKG. So an electrocardiogram is the record. It's a record that you can actually see, like it looks like a graph almost, of the heart's activity. It's a recording of the heart's activity. And there are lots of parts to an EKG, but we're going to break it down to just the three main parts. So these are the only parts that you guys would be asked about, like on a test. The P wave, which is here. The QRS complex, which is the sharp spike in the middle. And then the T wave is the last little part at the end. So I'll just tell you basically what is happening in the heart when you see each of these parts of the EKG. The P wave is caused by, and I'm gonna spell this for you guys. So the P wave is caused by atrial depolarization. Okay, so this is going back to AMP1. I've been talking about the action potential, which is the nerve impulse. It's an electrical signal that causes muscle contractions. So that much I think you guys probably remember. But also, do you remember that an action potential has two parts? It has the depolarization, and you don't have to remember all the stuff that's happening. It's when like sodium ions are moving. So depolarization phase, and then it's followed by repolarization. It's basically just like the first half of the action potential, and then the second half of the action potential is what depolarization and then repolarization are. So when I say that the P wave represents atrial depolarization, just know that that's the beginning of the action potential. So when you see that P wave, you know that the action potential has been initiated in the atria. So it's when you see atrial depolarization, it's just the beginning of the action potential. It's when it first starts in the atria. And what I have written in your outline is that the atria will contract after the P wave begins. So as soon as you have that action potential spreading through the atria, that triggers the contraction. So it's just like any muscle contraction. You have to have the electrical signal first from the nervous system. And then it's followed by the muscular contraction. So once you have that initial action potential, that depolarization, then you're going to have atrial contraction. Okay, then the QRS complex is caused by ventricular depolarization. Okay, so that is caused by ventricular depolarization. So now you have the action potential that's started in the atria, and the atria then contracted. Now it just spreads down to the ventricles. So now you have depolarization. So that's just the first part of the action potential in the ventricles. So right after that, and this is in your outline already, right after that, the ventricles are going to contract. Okay, and then finally, we have one more thing. The T wave is caused by ventricular repolarization. So that is just like the last half of the action potential. And it's actually, it happens after contraction. So after you've had that contraction, what's going to happen in the ventricles is relaxation. So that's noted in your outline that the ventricles will relax right after this stage. Okay, and you guys have this same diagram in your outline, so you can see what each of the main parts of the EKG represent, what's happening in the heart with each of those parts. Okay, I am running out of time to get to the blood vessel outline. So what I think I'll do is I'll just talk about heart sounds real quick. And then I want to just define systole and diastole. The rest of this is filled in for you, all of this. And then starting with, sorry, I have my outline pulled up as if you guys can see it when I'm saying all of this is filled in for you. The whole next section is filled in for you, the cardiac cycle. So you're good there. And then the next section, cardiac output, is what I have the recorded lecture on. So once I go through this, you will have the entire heart outline filled out. What I can do is I'll look and see how much you might be missing from the blood vessels outline. And I can record maybe another small lecture for you guys, or hold like another optional session next week and record it. So you have that just to make sure you have everything you need. But let me just keep going, just like a couple more quick things. If you just go down below that EKG diagram, you'll see the heart sounds section. So here we go. Oh, I guess I don't really have a slide for that. I'll just leave this one up. The heart sounds, any heart sound that you hear, like listening with a stethoscope, are produced by the heart valves. So the two normal sounds that you tend to hear when you're listening to the heart are, they say it sounds like a lubbed up sound, lubbed up. And then you keep hearing it over and over. So that first sound, the lub sound, is caused by the closing of the cuspid valve. That is caused by the closing of the cuspid valves. Okay, and that sound tends to be a little bit longer and louder, that first sound. And then the second sound, the dup sound, is caused by the closing of the semilunar valves. And that sound tends to be a little shorter and softer than the first one. Okay, and then a heart murmur is really, it's a broad thing. It's any abnormal heart sound. Okay, and because the heart sounds are caused by the closing of the heart valves, typically a heart murmur is caused by a problem with one of the valves. So the valves maybe aren't closing properly, something to that effect. There's all different kinds of heart murmurs caused for different reasons and different levels of severity with them. All right, I have 3 minutes left. I just want to give you guys a quick definition for systole and diastole, which are right below in the cardiac cycle section. But then the rest of that section, the notes are filled in for you. So cardiac cycle is just all the events that occur with one heartbeat. So where the blood is flowing through the heart, like from the atria into the ventricles and then out. But two terms that you will see are systole and diastole. So the term systole refers to contraction. So if you see like atrial systole, that means that the atria are contracting. And then the term diastole refers to relaxation. Okay, so with all of that,
What was systole again? I'm sorry.
it's contraction.
Okay, thank you.
So with all of that, with what's filled in already, and then with the lecture that I have going over cardiac output and stroke volume, I think you guys pretty much have this whole outline filled in. With the blood vessels, there might be a couple little parts that are missing, which for sure you can fill them in using your textbook. But I'll go through, and if there's a significant piece missing, maybe I can record like a little mini lecture and I'll post it in the web page along with the blood pressure one that's already there. So I will take a look at that and see what I can do. And also I'm going to stop the recording